Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Friday, January 3rd, 2025. This episode is sponsored by Passages International, and they make green burial products. One of the things that I felt like I ought to mention, and it was weird because it was going to be an In Case You Missed It story, but now it will be part of the advertisement. Earlier this week, there was a feature in Stars and Stripes about the response that veterans are having to 3 of the national cemeteries accepting green burials, starting to encourage green burials. It was kind of a big news at the end of last year, and it's something that I'm working on a feature now for probably early February or maybe early March. But the idea that the federal government is saying, yes, if you don't want a big deal, or if you don't want to be cremated, if you want to use your veteran benefit to purchase green services, you can. And I think we might see that as one of the serious turning points in the rise of green burial and green memorialization. Link in the show notes to some of the talks I've already had with Darren Crouch, who's the president and founder of Passages International, where he's talking about, some of the things they do and the kind of niche they filled when there was like a disconnect between, green burial and green cremation. So they have urns and they have wicker caskets and all sorts of memorialization options as well. You can find all of their information, link in the show notes. Also, first up this week isn't quite a correction. If you watched or listened to the last episode, I had talked about a viral story about a funeral home in Ohio that purported to be the first funeral home in Ohio that had a liquor license, and it didn't ring true to me. I was very, I was supportive. I am supportive. I think that it's an excellent idea, and I think that it is, kind of a no-brainer. But it was weird because the funeral home in question wasn't open yet. It wasn't an established funeral home that was getting a license. It was a company that was opening from scratch that was going to incorporate, celebrations of life and the and the alcohol that often entails into its business plan. And what I said in the last episode, we took a week off for the holiday, but what I said at the time was, it seemed strange to me that it was legal in Ohio, but it still hadn't been done by any of the other funeral homes. And of course, a couple days after my story came out, the Columbus Dispatch ran a story saying that they said they were the first, but that they were mistaken. There are several funeral homes in Ohio that already have liquor license and already serve at funerals. They just didn't make a big deal out of it, and that's interesting in and of itself. So if you are a funeral home in a state that allows liquor to be served at funerals, it might be worth your while to let people know. Now that it's been viral in the consumer media, you may want to ring up your own local newspaper and say, hey, we've been serving, alcohol at our celebrations of life for 10 years, for 30 years, for 50 years, for whatever. But there are some places where it's illegal, and there are some places where it is legal. And where it is legal, I think many, if not most, as people are converting to having all of these celebrations of life areas or repurposing their main chapel or one of their side chapels into a celebration of life room. It's worth ringing your own bell, tooting your own horn, getting the word out that it's something that you do, because it's a thing. It's a thing that now people know. I mean, I got a bunch of emails now that I do this kind of work. Every time something bubbles up into the consumer media consciousness, Instagram and Facebook, people tag me in all of these stories. And I must have been tagged in 10 stories about this Ohio funeral home. And, at the time I was able to say, yeah, actually there are several already, but it's still an exciting proposition. Also, I like to drink, and my friends know that. So, so it seemed like the perfect story for me to write, but it's already been written much better by other people. Anyway, there's a link to that Columbus Dispatch story in the show notes. Certainly you have not missed the news reports that former President Jimmy Carter is dead. That is no longer news by the time you're listening to this, but one of the things that I've seen in the coverage is more than a couple funeral homes around the country are doing their own celebration of Jimmy Carter and doing their own, not necessarily memorials, but there are several that have guest books, visitor books for people to sign. And some funeral homes are accepting, small memorial tokens. And the idea is that these will be collected at these various funeral homes and then sent on to the Carter family. I've seen due dates ranging from the 9th until the 15th of January. So if it's something that you think your community would be interested in, there is still time, again, to ring your own bell and to reach out to the local newspapers and say, hey, we're putting together a guest book. If anyone wants to come and sign a guest book and send it on to the Carter family with their well wishes or with their condolences or with their fond memories. All of these stories, one of these things that many of these stories had in common was there was someone who said, oh, I met Jimmy Carter in 1950, or I met Jimmy Carter 3 years ago, and he was very nice to me. And I guess he touched enough people that they're all kind of reaching back out and saying, what can we do to do more to memorialize him personally? And I think that this is a wonderful way to do it, as well as another opportunity to connect with the community. And everybody dies and everybody needs to be memorialized. And this is a good way to deliver that message as part of a kind of collective good spirit. So link to a couple of those stories in the show notes. I didn't link them all because there were really quite a few. But I picked out 3 that I thought kind of covered the bases, and you can see what they're doing if it's something you'd like to repeat, or you can do something all on your own. Along the lines of Jimmy Carter, I guess it's also important to say that among those links in the show notes is a link to a Washington Post story that has all of the different places and the timeline for the upcoming lying in state and the transfer of former President Carter from Georgia to Washington and then back to be buried with his wife, Rosalind. I also should mention, link in the show notes, that we've already done a Funerals of the Famous for Rosalind. And what that is, if you're not familiar, is we do short biographies of prominent people, often when they die. And we collect that actually into books. Our latest Funerals of the Famous is coming out already. I read it. I don't think you can read it yet, but I've already read it, so it should be out directly. And Jimmy Carter won't be in there, I don't think, but Rosalind is for sure, because I read that, and it's a good story. So it's been nearly a month since I reported on the unclaimed remains ceremonies scheduled in both Los Angeles, California and Bozeman, Montana. And mostly I reported on it because I kind of got a kick out of the disconnect. One had, like 1,800 people from the last several months, like maybe the last 18 months or whatever. And the next, Bozeman had only had 66 people who hadn't been claimed in the last 100 years. And, for obvious reasons, people who go to Bozeman probably know people in Bozeman, and many people go to Los Angeles not knowing anyone and not finding anyone, and then dying alone there and unclaimed. And sometimes people can't find them. But this week, Bozeman had its ceremony, and it only laid 51 of the 66 individuals to rest because the publicity around it got people to check the list. And sure enough, a bunch of people came to collect their loved ones and to have their own ceremonies for them. And I'm going to read a direct quote from the story because I thought it was fantastic. And it's one of those, insofar as there can be a nice Christmas funeral story, not written by our own Tom Nondorf, then this is probably it. One of the funeral representatives said, we had one gentleman who came forward to claim his grandfather's urn. His grandfather was born in 1883, and the grandson was 90 years old. We were finally able to get him back with his family. A 90-year-old going to pick up, as a grandfather myself, as the idea of a 90-year-old grandson, going out in the Bozeman winter to claim my urn, it's touching. It's touching in a way that is a reminder about how significant memorialization can be. And I know that, there are 1,000 stories out there like this. And if you're a funeral director, you probably have 5 or 6 of them yourself, long unclaimed remains finally picked up by someone who was happy to be able to take charge of them. So that's all. It's just a cool win, and I thought that you would like to be updated that like a dozen people came, more than 15, I guess, people came and picked up cremated remains that otherwise would have gone unclaimed and been interred in Bozeman, Montana. Link to that story. It's a fun read. There's a link to it in the show notes. Last but not least, I want to draw your attention to the upcoming Funeral Service Insider newsletter, which will have a collection of people who were asked to provide commentary on their predictions, hopes, or fears for 2025, as well as any personal, professional victories or news stories around the funeral service that they thought were important in 2024. And I got plenty of responses, but I only got one that was, I think, a specialized response, because I said you can reply in writing, and almost everyone did. One person, and no spoilers, you'll have to listen to the podcast. One person did call and leave their answer as a voicemail, and that will be, that was actually set for the opening of Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, which is scheduled to release on Monday, the 6th of January, excuse me, Monday, the 6th of January. And this person will talk about it. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is because I'm going to be soliciting more audio feedback from you guys from 2025. So this is the first of, I don't know, maybe another dozen or 25 times you're going to hear this appeal or invitation, as you like it. If you have any feedback and you would like it played on the podcast, you can call and leave a voice message at 732-746-0233, extension 709. And that is my phone number, and it goes directly to a voicemail that I will pick the recording up of later and stick in the podcast as is appropriate. So, depending upon what you say, if you say that I'm an idiot, I will play it. But if you say something mean about other people, I probably won't. So that's just an invitation to you. The number will be in the show notes, but again, in case you have a pen and paper at hand, it is 732-746-0233, extension 709. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you think about the show. I'd love to hear what you think about any of these topics. Also, if you are a subscriber to Funeral Service Insider, you have the opportunity to comment in the comments section on the website. So when you get this story in your email, you can click through to the website. If you're a subscriber, you may have to activate your registration, but you also may already have activated your registration. So if you get in, if it asks you to establish a name and passcode, please do. Otherwise, enter your name and passcode and you can go to the story and make a comment. If you comment on a story, I promise I will respond, and again, as is appropriate. So all of those things, we're looking forward to a great 2025 this year. If you get a chance to peek at the upcoming Funeral Service Insider newsletter, I outlined some of that, but there's plenty more stuff going on. It's going to be a great year. And before I sign off, I want to thank once again our sponsor, Passages International. And that will do it for this week. Funeral Service Insider, in case you missed it, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written, edited, and videoed by me, Tony Russo. I want you to have a great year, and I want to have a great year, so let's get to it. And that'll be all for this week on In Case You Missed It.